Welcome to the 10-Minute Treasure. My name's Jeff Pospisil, and lately I've been looking into church financial statements because I realize that a lot of people that serve in the church, whether they're pastors or board members or volunteers, they may not speak the language of accounting, which is financial reports. And I want you to be able to understand as best as you can the financial information you're receiving. And then also maybe you can be able to ask for better reports that you can understand better. So this week we are going to look at the income statement. By the way, last week we looked at the balance sheet, and that's where we're going to start. So I know I just referred to this statement as the income statement, but churches use a lot of different terms for it. It could be the statement of activities, that's a common name, or the profit and loss or P&L. It could also be just the treasurer report or the budget report. But here's what you're going to find. You're going to find, first of all, you're going to find income. And this statement will tell you where the income comes from. So is it coming from your regular offering? Is it coming from Sunday school or interest or maybe building use fees? Something like that. It's also going to tell you expenses. And that's telling you where the money is going. So it'll tell you where the money is coming from into the church and where it's going when it leaves the church. And then the last thing, and this is a very important one, and this is one of those very important numbers, period, to be able to find, and that's the bottom line. And that really tells you how is the church doing for the year. The income statement may also show you how that money is restricted, if at all. So it'll show you the income and expenses from operations. So what is for the general fund that is unrestricted, that is free for the church to use as the church leadership decides. It may also show you other um, funds. So it could show you like the missions fund or the trustees fund. Those income and expenses from money that is either donor restricted or board designated. And again, I prefer personally to keep track of that on the balance sheet in the equity or the net asset section. So that's where I personally prefer to keep track of those, but some churches include this in their income statement. And the last one is to think about how does your church track gains and losses. Normally, this doesn't happen that often for churches that sell capital assets. So capital assets like a building, a parsonage. If it was on your balance sheet, the parsonage, if you sell it for more or less than what it cost you in the first place, you will experience a gain or a loss. And how is that actually recorded? So a lot of times that'll end up on the income statement. The other one to think about is how is your church, if you have investments, how is your church recording gains or losses from the market? So that's just another thing. That's maybe more of a question. Where are those showing up? All right, so now we have a fake church financial statement. This is for Parkston United Methodist Church. So if anybody wants to start a church in Parkston, I have some chart of accounts for you as well as a financial statement. And I'll put a link to that in the description. By the way, by default, this is called a profit and loss in QuickBooks. And that's where I set it up. I could have changed it to statement of activities or income statement, and that would have been fine. And by the way, this income statements are run for a period of time. So this is January through October. So just to let you know, that's how that works. So first of all, you see this is the operating income. So this is only what I included here is general fund items. And you can see just the various breakdown that most of it's coming from general offerings, but you also see Sunday school. And the most important number here is our total general fund income for the period of January through October. By the way, another helpful thing would have been is to have the budget here. And actually the year-to-date budget would have probably been even better. So if I would have had the budget from January through October, that would have been really helpful in this report. And you can do that in almost every accounting system. Another thing that would have been helpful, and you probably could have included this as well, would have been the prior year. So where were we at this time last October? And because without that reference, it's a little bit difficult to tell exactly how well we're doing. 300,000 might seem good, and it might be extraordinarily good, or it might be poor. So without the budget, without the prior year activity, it's a little bit difficult to tell. All right, next we have our expense section. And although it doesn't say operating expenses like it did up there in operating income, this is only operating expenses, only general fund or unrestricted dollars here. And then, well, first of all, again, I think it would be very helpful to have the budget here as well as the prior year. Both of those things would be very, very helpful. And I like to use year-to-date budget, by the way. So how I set this up is I have multiple levels of detail. So here you can see in the pastor relations section, I have a breakdown where I have the senior pastor, which is broken down, and the youth pastor and the children's pastor. And all the way down here, I have all this level of detail, which is very good for the finance committee. Not so helpful for probably most other people, but your finance committee will need this for sure when they're planning to set their next budget. So, and then I also have a very similar section, by the way, for conference giving. So this is United Methodist Church, so there's apportionments and so forth. And the trustees also have a section. So you can see the parsonage, and you can see the church utilities and the church maintenance. And again, this whole section here would be a very good report just to give to the trustees. You don't have to give them everything. You could just give them this whole detailed section. Because I have multiple levels of detail, I use sub-accounts. I can send a detailed or a summarized report. And then you can see I have worship and office and children's ministry, and all these different ministries have their own section. And by the way, when you're setting up, I would ask, so if you're the treasurer or if you're somebody in ministry, you can change the names and titles of these. So you can track what you want to track. So if you have something that you don't really like, you can, or you need a new account, you can ask them to add that. And the important number to watch then is that bottom line there. So that total expenses is, if you're sitting on the board or if you're the pastor or one of the senior leaders, looking at that bottom line is very, very important. And speaking of the bottom line, the actual very bottom line, the net income, is the most important one for you to know. How is the church doing? Again, all this is telling you is income, which is 301,000, minus the expenses, which is what was that, 327,000, and that gives us about a loss so far through these first 10 months of minus 25,600. Again, it'd be very, very helpful to know what it was last year. It'd be very, very helpful to know what the budget is through this period of time. And by the way, you don't want your budget just divided by 12. You want your budget to show what you expect to receive and spend for each individual month, not just divided by 12. And some church financial statements below that net income, they will have some more lines, below the net operating income. They will have other income and other expenses, especially if they're in QuickBooks. And this is where, if I'm going to use the income statement to track my designated or donor restricted giving and spending, I would put it in below here in this section. So that way people would just have to look at the operating part if you're on the board, and then specific people would look lower into that designated area. One of the biggest bonuses about setting up your financials, your chart of accounts with sub-accounts, is that you can quickly and easily hide details that you don't need to send to everybody. So if I was sending out this report, I would go ahead and I would probably hide and just summarize all of this. And I'm just going to manually do it here. You could also just run the report just to show a certain level of details, but I'm just going to go ahead and just give the totals and just give you an idea of what that would look like. Because for a board at the board level, again, if you have the prior year numbers and also the budget, you're going to be able to tell at a quick glance whether that total for the program, whether it's your staffing or your trustees or your worship, whether it's in line, or maybe we need to be asking different questions. So I'm still hiding stuff here. And again, this is the manual way to do it. But again, you could do this automatically and memorize this report in QuickBooks and in many other different accounting systems. And last one. And here we have, now it's a one-page report. And again, if you had a couple extra columns, it might help, but you can easily see the income. A lot of times I leave that income so broken out because there's usually not that many items. And then you could see all these expenses. And again, you would have your budget, year-to-date budget, hopefully prior year amounts right there. And if there was a problem in children's ministry, I could go ahead and if people wanted to know the details, they could look at it and maybe VBS was a little high or maybe something else was a little high. So we can give them that detail, but for most people, the detail is distracting more than it is providing useful information to them. So here are some questions that I would ask if I was looking at your income statement. First of all, I would ask, is it easy and clear to figure out exactly how we're doing for the general fund? Or are there donor restricted income and expense items mixed in there that I have to do some math to figure it out? And if that's the case, even requesting that they move those to that other income, other expense section, or somehow break those out some way differently. Another thing I would ask, because this is definitely not clear, is when is income recorded? So does whoever's keeping your books, do they record the income on the Sunday it was received? Or do they record it when it's deposited, which could be Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever it hits the bank? Because that can really change how your assumptions on how well the church is doing based on that knowledge. Another thing to ask is when are expenses recorded? For some churches, expenses are only recorded when the check is actually cut. Other churches, they might record it when the expense is incurred, which is accrual accounting. So for example, if a company provides a service for you, that is when it was incurred. And so somebody that's using accrual accounting, they would use that date of when that service was provided. So those are just some thoughts. And by the way, another question, and I didn't include it here, would be asking what other information can I see? So in my own financial statements, it would have been nice to maybe to have the month of October broken out so we could see how October was and not just the year-to-date amounts. And again, as I talked before, the prior year would be nice. The budget would be nice. Also, maybe the difference or how much is remaining of the budget would be nice, or what percentage of the budget is remaining. All those would be good things to talk about and ask whoever's keeping your books. All right, I hope this has been helpful to you, and I encourage you, if you found this helpful, like, subscribe, share, comment, all that is wonderful. And I did one on the balance sheet previously, so if you like this one, go ahead and check that one out as well. And I did one on an executive report and what that would look like. So until next time, God bless you.